Hey, in today's video, we're talking about the unintended consequences of dying with a bunch of traditional IRAs or traditional TSPs. Coming up next. Hey, this is Mel Stubbs. I'm a financial planner at Christy Capital Management, where we're helping clients work through and implement retirement strategies, most of whom are federal employees. So if that sounds like you, you're in the right place. If you need individualized help, go to christycapital.com and click Talk to an Advisor. So today we're talking about at least two unintended consequences of dying with a bunch of traditional IRA or traditional TSP. The main focus here is the fact that traditional money has not yet been taxed. So there's some unintended consequences if you die with a bunch of that type of money. The first we're going to focus on is tax brackets. And for this example, we're going to use someone who's at the top of the 12% tax bracket, married filing jointly, which for 2023 would be about $89,450. Let's just say that your taxable income is usually around $85,000 a year. If our example couple used the standard deduction of $27,700, that means their actual income would have been around $112,700. Well, let's talk about this couple as if it were you. You've accumulated a large TSP or traditional IRA, and then you die and you leave that to your spouse. If you look at the single tax brackets, the 12% tax bracket tops off at about $44,725. Let's say it was not the federal employee that died, but the spouse that died. You're still going to have your pension, you're still going to have the larger of the Social Securities, and you'll still be taking out some distributions, say from the traditional TSP or your traditional IRA. You still may be in the $85,000 a year taxable income based on choices that you make for distributions from your traditional accounts. Let's say the federal retiree is the one that dies. Then the pension usually gets cut in half with the survivor benefit, and there's still the larger of the Social Security that's available. But the remaining spouse can take traditional distributions up to the lifestyle that they want to live. So for this case, at least for this argument, we're going to say that they still need a similar income, about $85,000. So if you're single, it's going to be in the 22% tax bracket. The 22% tax bracket tops out about $95,000. Now this is a huge tax increase, going from 12% to 22%. It's almost double. One of the unintended consequences of dying with a large traditional IRA is that you can cause your remaining spouse to have to take distributions at potentially higher tax rates. Now for this example, we're going from 12% to 22%, which is a big jump. But for some people, it might be going from 22% to 24%. And you might argue that's not really that big of a jump. The key takeaway here is that dying with too much traditional IRA or too much traditional TSP can lead you to increased taxes in the future. Depending on the bracket that you're in and the bracket that you go to, it may be a small increase, it may be a large increase. Nevertheless, the single tax bracket is not nearly as advantageous as the married filing jointly. So at the death of one spouse, generally there are going to be some tax consequences. So this consequence deals with one spouse dying and leaving it to the remaining spouse. The second consequence I want to go over is when the money gets left, let's say to the next generation, to children for instance. When someone who is not a spouse inherits traditional money, there's a new 10-year rule where they have to take the entire IRA balance out as a distribution by the 10th year. And let me just stop for a minute to distinguish between traditional IRA and traditional TSP. If a non-spouse inherits a traditional IRA, we're fixing to go over those rules. But if you die and leave TSP to your spouse, and then your spouse continues to keep it in the TSP as a beneficiary participant account, and then your spouse dies, there are some huge unintended tax consequences. So whether your spouse leaves it to the children or whomever, the next beneficiary can no longer keep the account at the TSP. They have to take a full distribution where the entire thing would be taxable, all in 1 year. That's just how the TSP rules work. So this is a huge tax consequence of being the secondary beneficiary for TSP money. This consequence is totally fixable just by not holding the money in the TSP. Either as a TSP account owner, you can move the money to an IRA, or if you die and you leave your TSP to your spouse, then they're definitely going to want to move the money out of the TSP to get the better beneficiary tax treatment that IRAs give. So back to our original thesis here. If the second beneficiary, let's call it your children for instance, inherit traditional IRA, there's now a 10-year rule. Let's say that your children are maybe not so good with their money and they end up cashing it out pretty fast. Here's an article about how fast people spend their inheritances. It says that though you may like to think of them spreading it out for years, really making use of what you've left behind, the reality is that people usually spend it in a year or less. Here's a chart from the Inheritance Advanced that the average inheritance in the US is around $50,000. That makes me feel better about spending it all in 1 year. Hopefully children that are inheriting $500,000 are not going to be spending it all in 1 year, but we might be surprised. Here's an article from MarketWatch entitled 1 in 3 Americans to get an inheritance blow it. So if you have a child that inherits money and they're going to spend it quickly, if it's traditional, it's going to be 100% taxable at their tax bracket. So whatever their normal income would have been, plus they take from your traditional account to spend, is taxable. That could cause them to pay a lot higher taxes than you would have paid if you'd have done some planning over your lifetime. That's kind of a drawback for the child that maybe can't control their spending and goes through it faster. What about a child that's so good with their money they end up not touching the money for years and years? With the new 10-year rule, by that 10th year they have to withdraw everything from the IRA, which means it would be taxable. So they may be postponing all the way till the 10th year and then do a huge distribution in the 10th year, which has the same effect as the child who spent it all quickly. The issue is how much is being taxed in any one given year. So the general consensus of wise planning would be that if you have a 10-year period to get it out, you'd be doing a 1/10 of the balance every year distribution, so by the end, you'd have it all out in 10 years. But you spread it out evenly so you can try to average out the tax bracket. But it seems like in reality, that's not how people do it. So if you die with traditional money, especially lots of traditional money, you may be causing your spouse to be at a higher tax bracket because you chose to leave it all in traditional. If you leave it eventually to your children, and they're the ones that are going to be taxed on it, depending on how they manage their finances, there's at least 2 scenarios where they may be taxed at a higher rate than you would have been taxed if you'd have Roth converted some. So to me, this is a good argument for working out a tax strategy and a plan to implement that strategy to begin shifting money from traditional to Roth. Because there are unintended consequences of dying with a large traditional balance. And these unintended consequences can be planned for so that you don't have to have your money that you've worked hard for be overly taxed because either the way the tax system works or the way your children may end up poorly timing their distributions. This is a problem that's avoidable with proper planning. And the TSP doesn't let you do this planning. You cannot shift money from traditional to Roth inside of the TSP. If you're worried that your plan doesn't count for this, then reach out to ChristyCapital.com and click on Talk to an Advisor. If you want to know what to do financially when a loved one dies, check out this video right here. There's some planning things that you can be working on and implementing before a loved one dies, but what do you do after? Check out this video right here from Tommy Neesmith. My name is Mel Stubbs. I'll see you on the next video.